Hello, in this lecture we're going to take a look at using supply and demand. So we're going to look at what we have learned in terms of what supply and demand is and put those into practice in practical cases. In this case, in chapter 5, we're going to start off with our quote. Our quote here being from Nietzsche. I'm not a Nietzsche expert, but we'll take a look at this quote and put it into context of supply and demand. And so Nietzsche says that it is invisible hands that we are bent and tortured worst. So it is by invisible hands that we are bent and tortured worst. So obviously we're talking about invisible hands here, so I would assume that we are looking at the invisible hand being the supply and demand, and thinking that those conditions, those forces are going to have a significant impact on us, people, and their lives, and those are things that we need to consider and be aware of because they're basically kind of a part of human nature, part of the market, part of how people act under different conditions, and therefore those are strong forces that we need to consider. So chapter goals: apply the supply and demand model to real world events, demonstrate the effect of a price ceiling and a price floor on markets, explain the effect of excise taxes and tariffs on markets, explain the effect of quantity restrictions on a market, explain the effect of third-party payer systems on equilibrium price and quantity. Okay, so we're going to start off with just some demonstrations of some real-world examples of the supply and demand curve. So remember, we have our price here on the vertical, we have the quantity on the horizontal, we have our demand curve sloping down. Why does it slope down? Because as prices go up, people demand less. So if the price went up to here, people demand less, and vice versa. If the price goes down on the supply curve, we have upward sloping line, because as price goes up, the suppliers will supply more or want to supply more. Remember, once again, that the price is being set by the market. That's the market price, not necessarily any one individual supplier. They're price takers. So Hurricane Irene destroyed a significant portion of the apple crop in the northeastern U.S. So what's going to happen if a hurricane came in and destroyed the apple crop? That would mean that the supply is going to shift inwards, and we see this happen. The hurricane damage caused the supply curve to shift left because, of course, we have less of a supply. And in the short run, that will create, as we've discussed last time, an excess in demand. And in the long run, we will then end up at the new equilibrium here. So that'll shift out to the new equilibrium. Price rose from P1 to P2, where quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. So notice what's going to happen at that new equilibrium point. Price goes up, and we're going to have the quantity, of course, is going down. All right, let's take a look at another example. We've got the application. We've got sales of SUVs in the U.S. So gasoline in the U.S. Is increasingly expensive. We've seen gasoline go up and down. Obviously, it's going up and down a lot. But there was a point in time where we were trending towards big cars because we liked, big cars could fit more people in it and be more comfortable and whatnot. But SUVs and other types of big cars also consume a lot of gasoline, and if prices in gasoline go up, then there's of course pressure not to purchase as big a cars, purchase more fuel efficient cars. Now this is kind of a hot topic here because we also know that there's a lot of there's environmental pressures these days in terms of the type of car and how much gas we use, and those could affect this as well. But if we just look at this factor, we can see that, of course, it is clear that gasoline prices and how much they cost will affect decision making. So in this case, we're looking at demand, and if gasoline prices are going up, then we're going to demand less at any given point in time. So notice that if gasoline prices were here and the prices stay constant and they are now here, then the quantity demanded is going down. If at that current price the supply is outside of the demand, we have excess supply in this case, what then will happen is the price for the SUVs fell from P1 to P2, and the quantity is going to go from Q0 to Q1. Now we're at the new equilibrium price here. So application, we have edible oils in the world. So edible oils, we're going to discuss the same kind of situation where we have the price, the quantity, and we have got the equilibrium for edible oils. And there's a growing middle class in Asia has increased demand for these types of oils. So in this case, now we've got an increased population. So an increased population that is now increasing and willing and wanting this particular product, which of course shifts out the demand. So at any given point at this price, now the demand has shifted out here, more demand at the same price. However, we're looking at another factor here. We have another factor going on. At the same time, the U.S. farmers are growing more corn and less soy. So soy being apparently what is needed for the edible oils, where the corn is going to be used somewhere else. So that the farmers at this point in time, for whatever reason, because they're using the land to produce corn rather than the soy, and that is shifting the supply inwards. So at that given price, we were producing here in quantity, and it would move inward to here at this same price because of the decision to produce more corn and less soy. So if we take those two things that are happening, now we've got two things that are happening at the same time, then the result is an increased price for edible oils. The new equilibrium will veer in to here, this single equilibrium here. So if we analyze these changes, really good to take a look at this chart, but then like graph them out and try to see them visually. It's really good to, draw the lines on the chart, move everything around, and see if you can prove all of these things on the chart in terms of a pictorial format. So let's just go through the first one. I'm going to go through all the ones where there's no change in demand and see what would happen in terms of supply. So obviously if there's no change in demand and there's no change in supply, then P is going to be the same price and quantity is going to be the same. If there's no change in demand and supply increases, then price is going to go down and quantity is going to go up. So you're going to want to check that, graph that out, a situation like that, and check that out. If demand, no change in demand and supply decreases, then price is going to go up, quantity is going to go down. Again, graph it out. If we then take the circumstance where we say, okay, I'm going to take no change in supply now, and we're going to have the demand change. So let's take a look at that. No change in supply. We already did this one. So demand increases. So then the price is going to go up, quantity up. Graph that out. No change in supply. Demand decreases. Price is going to go down, quantity go down. Okay, and then of course here's where it gets messy in this box here, because now we've got changes in both. And so let's take a look at that. If demand increases and supply increases, then P is ambiguous because we don't know the rate of change. It depends on the rate, but we know that quantity will go up. So graph some different scenarios there and see if you can prove those scenarios. And then we've got if the demand decreases and supply increases. Now Q is ambiguous because again it depends on the rates that we don't know, but we know that P will go down, price will go down. And if we say that if we go to the last rows here, we're going to say that demand increases but supply decreases. Q is ambiguous, but P goes up. And then if we say demand decreases and supply decreases, P is ambiguous and Q goes down. So again, it's really good to look at this chart and prove it to yourself pictorially. See how the shifts will happen. You want to be able to visualize these types of things with the graphs.